We got several things we're going to cover in an hour, but we want to go back and pick up with the last meeting when John and us their activities. And so, JP, I'll let you go ahead because you know what they are.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Jeremy's going to go through a few things real quick, and then I'll add on maybe one or two at the end.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to just share my screen with our year calendar. I don't know who the host is, if they can have me share on there.
Is she on?
Either Trevin or Sister Huff.
Have you tried to share it? I think I set it up where you could.
Yeah, it says host disabled.
Oh, okay. Trevin.
As we were working on that, but we've okay, that works. Here we go. I don't have a nice PowerPoint like last time there, but here's our year calendar. Kind of see everything we're doing. We have some reoccurring things like y'all probably have. Our group have a group of sewing ladies called the Threads of Love that met regularly, and we're working on different projects. We met, our monthly potluck time on Sunday nights, and what those were. Our teens, we did a number of things as you see in red. We tried to have a teen devo once a month. Well, not depending on the month. If we were really busy, we'd have about 7 or 8 of those a year. So we didn't overwhelm one of our months that we had. So we spread those out through the year at different people's houses that wanted to host one. And the first one I always have is a parent teen devo with the parents and the teens. January, we go to a youth conference in Conway called Youth Outreach University. Been going on a long time. Now it's hosted at the Robinson Center Congregation in Conway. So we do that in January. We've had a teen hosted youth banquet where we've honored a group that they've picked, either like our elderly or last year was our deacons and elders and their wives. We do that in February. And then our LTC convention usually starts about now. We've started practicing and signing up for different events, but we haven't even begun that with what we're going through, but our convention's always in April there. Let's see, April gets us into our ARC retreat, and I know in the past that Combe Street has come to that back with Luke Dockery and when he was over there at Farmington. So that may be something we continue to, depending on our numbers, is usually what that depends on, how many people we can have at that facility. But I know we've had Combe Street come to that many times as well, and love to do that again with you guys. Summer is usually our busy time, like most youth ministries, and everybody's out of school. So we do a number of things from Uplift at Harding to mission trips to, I lead one to Honduras, a separate one. Mike talked about another one we have. Before I came to Johnson, I was doing trips to Honduras for 25 years. So we continue to do 2 now. And so we have 2 trips to Honduras. We were supposed to do Guatemala this year, but everything got canceled. So we do another trip with a mission home that we support in New Mexico. And that was one we ended up at last year. And we're going to continue to go back to that and help the trip there, the children's home, with a fundraiser that they do with a bull ride. And that's out of my league because I don't know anything about bull riding or rodeos, but and then we've just, camp comes in August, VBS, some of the general things everybody does. We have a group that David talked about, our young adult group called the Crew, and we usually have a retreat together. A lot of family things in Black, like the, hay rides and the outdoor service that everyone's always invited to on the 25th. I don't know if we're having that this year yet. We haven't said, but haven't decided that, but just a number of things. And then locally in November, Deeper Youth Conference. And I know that's, we've even had a song leader from Combe Street a few years ago, remember? Ty came and led singing for us. So we do that still at Center Street, and that's virtual-ish this year, depending on, we're having it, we're going to have people continue to maybe host it locally in their own congregation this year with the content we give them. And then just kind of a community thing we do with the police in December. We've paired with them as they donate toys to the community of Johnson. So we help wrap all the presents. We don't collect them all, but we help wrap them and then help them with what they're doing to pass them out in the community. So those are just a few of our things. Currently, we're not doing most of those. Like y'all, we're meeting just on Sunday morning, and we have been having their teen class on Wednesday nights, mostly in my backyard, and we've just recently been back in the building a few weeks, and we're looking into getting back to an adult class, some kid classes to add to those. So that's currently where we're at, and just had some Zoom things like that for kids and a couple local things together. But that's kind of been our operations lately. Has been a lot of online, and hopefully we get back to our calendar that we have, and looking forward to that resuming like normal, like everybody. But those are just some of the things we're doing. I know, talking to one of our elders recently after he watched our last conversation, that was something he's interested in, having us see ways that we can have our teens together and y'all join us for things that we're doing. And so hopefully that's the case in the future, that we can both open that up when things are safer to get back together in larger numbers. So looking forward to that day. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Jeremy. I don't have much to add. I was going to talk a little bit about New Mexico, but you covered it quite a bit. We support an orphanage in Gallup, New Mexico, on the Navajo reservation, and it's a group. So I have some friends that have been going out there a long time, and they come and made a presentation to us after we went, because our trip to Honduras got canceled for political reasons, unrest. And so on short notice, we ended up going out there, and it's been a wonderful experience. It's an orphanage similar to, like you think of in, I don't know, the early 20th century, where people just drop their kids off on the reservation. It's not a kids in the system type deal like around here, but it's an orphanage where, you know, people decide that they can't take care of their kids and they just drop them off. It's incredibly sad. It's something we love working with, and it's something we love to do. The next thing we're going to do is Miss Bland, Sister Bland, had something she wanted to
JP, before we
Yes.
go there, let me ask a question. How do y'all raise the money to do these things?
I mean, we budget for it. We budget for a lot of it. We're blessed enough to where we're able to help. And a lot of it is budgeted. We try to spend as much as we can on other stuff as opposed to, sorry, that's my kid. As much as we can on, we have a group of men that are always looking for domestic mission work and local mission work, as well as we have international work as well. And this is just part of what we budget for. We've done mission Bible schools in the past in different parts of Arkansas and things like that. It's just something that we budget for to spend money on spreading the gospel.
Okay. When you say we, are you talking about individually or the church itself?
The church.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do anybody else have any other questions pertaining to those things?
JB, when you guys have some of those events and they start coming back up, if JP or Jeremy or any of y'all, if you guys could just remind our congregation, because not only do we not know when those events that you guys always do are actually going to happen, but we would like to get our youth involved when possible, especially if it's like something virtual or something like that. Just to have that option for them. But if you guys could just keep us in the loop, really.
Absolutely. I'll make sure Jeremy and mainly Jeremy has yours and G's phone numbers so that he can contact y'all or who works with y'all's group youth the most.
Youth ministers, James Wilkes.
Okay, and I'll get Jeremy all y'all's information.
Okay.
Y'all's Jeremy information. Y'all just text Jeremy whenever you want, whatever you need. That's what I do. Just all hours of the night. I just text Jeremy when I need something. So, I'm kidding.
That's true. I don't
Okay.
sleep. I just answer JP's text.
He's wonderful.
Oh,
I put him
That's
to
it.
work. If I can't get him to do something, I go to the deacons over the youth group, and I'm like, hey, tell Jeremy to do that. No.
Okay, then. Thank you. Go ahead. Now you want to introduce Sister Bland.
Yeah, we've asked questions about experiences that we would like to be aware of to help prevent in the future, as related to race relations in the church. And Sister Bland come to me after the last meeting and said something she wanted to share and something that we can. The best way I know to explain this type of, we talked about this a little bit each week, and it's just experiences that that I've never been around, that we need to be aware of, and I would like everybody to, she has something that's we should all hear, and I want her to tell us about it.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Beverly Bland, Sister Bland. I'm a retired auditor. I audited hospitals for years. And I would go drive around the country, and I would go in. And my main thing about traveling, and that made it safe for me, was that I always found a church home. That was my main priority. Find a church home. If I could stay with a family, I would stay with a church family as well. But once I got where I was going, whether I was on the West Coast or the East Coast, because I had been as far as New Hampshire, I've been in North Carolina, I've been in Los Angeles, I was up in Seattle. So I've been all across the country. But I had a horrible experience when I was in, this was in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. There's a Church of Christ right on I-55, and I can't think of it. I've been racking my brain trying to think of the name of the church. It's right off Interstate 55. It's in the heart of the Black community, but it's a predominantly white church, very huge church. And I saw it, I started going there, and one of the reasons I went there was because a couple that I was staying with went to that church. And in fact, Bill Walsh's daughter that was living in was Bill Walsh's daughter living in Mississippi, Richardson? Was she in Mississippi at one point? I think she was. She and her husband were down there. Bill Walsh used to be or is still the elder out at, when I attended North Street, and then it became Mount Comfort. But anyway, I attended that church, and the first time I went there, I went to Sunday school. And the teacher, I didn't know anybody there. The teacher was talking about how, you try to live a certain way. You live, you obey the rules. You try to do everything that's right so that, you don't have problems in your life. You don't expect to have problems in your life. And I was trying to understand the point that he was making. And I'm listening to it. And when I'm in a class, I speak up. Even I know people don't know me, but I'm not shy, as you can tell, right? But anyway, I raised my hand and I said, well, I have never felt like no matter how well I lived, that I wouldn't have problems or bad things wouldn't happen to me. I never had that perspective. And he looked at me, and this was a crowded class, and he said, well, you had affirmative action. And it stung so badly. And just talking about it right now, it hurts. You have to understand, I started college in 1974. There was no such thing as affirmative action. But for him to just throw that out there to shut me down, it hurt. Now, I expect that from people in the world. I don't expect them to be nice to me. I don't expect them to give me a fair shake. My safe place is in the body when I come together with my brothers and sisters in Christ. And maybe that's naive. I don't know. Just long story short, I did leave that class. I went to a different class. And I did eventually speak to the elders about it. And they had me write something up about him. And I don't know if they spoke to him or not. But that has always troubled me, because I never went to that brother and said, you said the wrong thing to me. And, the Bible says you're not supposed to have aught against your brother. And I've prayed about that, and I just asked God to just take it out. Don't let me have I've never had ill feelings towards him or anything. But how do you deal with that? How do you respond to things like that? I didn't know. I was just shocked. And I was a visitor, and I got to thinking, what if I had not been a Christian? What if I had come to church searching? And that's the response that I got. My soul might be lost if I hadn't been a Christian. I don't know. It's troubled me. And, I've never experienced that. I've lived in Arkansas. Well, I had lived in Arkansas for 29 years. And then after I retired, I moved to Ohio because I lived with my daughter and son-in-law. And we've lived there for 4 years. So now we're back. And I'm in Bentonville. I was in Fayetteville before. But I didn't experience that in Arkansas. I just didn't run across those kinds of attitudes in the church, because I guess because we fellowshipped with each other and we got to know each other and that type of thing. I mean, I know it exists, but how do you deal with it? What do you say? How do you shut that down and still maintain your spirituality? Please help. That's all. That's all I got.
Okay. Let me give you my perspective on it. One of the classes we had this summer, he was a white principal of over in North Little Rock, and that came up, affirmative action, and he was saying, well, black people had favoritism of affirmative action. Now, what I did, I just kind of ignored it. Okay, one, it is true, but it was true because blacks could not get into certain colleges. So then that's when the affirmative action came. But what I did, I ignored it. I really did. And what I would have done in your situation, probably got up and left like you did. But, that just happened to be one bad apple. Another experience one time, Mary and I and the family, the kids, we stopped at a church. They wouldn't serve us communion. And I asked him, he said, no, we don't serve y'all communion. And that was all right. We left. But it comes down to who I'm really is or who you really are. We're God's children. Ignorancy, we have to overlook. It's going to be there. It's not ever going to go away. We just have to overlook it and keep on doing what the Lord wants us to do. Now, that's my perspective. Anybody else?
Brother Williams, real quick, I didn't want to interrupt you, but for those that don't know, because people only know what they know, But when you say affirmative action, can you explain to the group what that means? Because I think some people have what they think it means and what it actually means.
Can I give you from the business perspective? When they started, when I started working in corporate America, affirmative action came on a few years later. And affirmative action basically was to say that employers were not supposed to discriminate based on your race, your ethnicity, or your race, ethnicity, and everyone was supposed to be given a level playing field. So if I turn I have a 4-year degree, I have a master's degree. If I turn in my resume and Sally Jones turns in her resume, and the only difference between us is the color of our skin, preferential treatment cannot step up. They've got to find something that is better in her resume or in my resume to hire that person. It can't be based on color. And a lot of what was happening in the corporate world were that a lot of Blacks were being hired, but they weren't being promoted. And I guess that happened, a lot of them weren't getting into colleges either. But I grew up in Chicago, born and raised. And I got into college in 1974 based on myself. It had nothing to do with my color because there was no affirmative action, meaning we've got to allow so many Blacks in and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, what happened in the corporate world was a lot of the managers said that, well, because of affirmative action, we have to hire inferior people. That's not what affirmative action said. It said you just can't discriminate. You can't just say, there's Beverly Bland and there's Sally Jones, and we're going to pick Sally Jones because Beverly's Black. And that's what was happening. Just as an aside too, the company that I worked for out of Minnesota, Cargill, was sued for discrimination. And we had to go through a corporate training, a sensitivity training. And one of the things they asked was whatever you thought, heard, or believed about minorities. And this was before, this is before laptops. This was back in 1982. So he had this easel and he was writing all this stuff down. And I was in the session that had all the corporate execs in it. And there was a spattering of Blacks and male Blacks and women and Hispanics. So the things that they were writing down, whatever you thought, heard, or believed about Blacks, descended from apes, likes chicken, runs very fast, and just on and on and on. Every type of ethnic stereotype you can think of was written on these sheets, and he had them plastered to the walls. And, I said, if I thought, heard, or believed that about Black people, I wouldn't want to hire them either. And the facilitator said, I didn't ask, he said, how many people have Black friends? And a few hands went up. And he said, where are their attributes up here? He said, I just asked you what you thought, heard, or believed about Black people. I didn't say negative or positive. I just said whatever you thought, heard, believed. What he was pointing out was, if people are different from you, you don't look for similarities, you look for differences. And you look at the negative connotations, and it exacerbates those stereotypes. And that was what he was trying to reveal to all of us that were in the room, including the chairman of the board and the C-suite people that were there. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me, because it made me understand, if this is what you think about me, I wouldn't want to be around me. So when you're talking about affirmative action, all it meant was, do not discriminate when you're hiring people based on the color of their skin, based on, or anything like that. Everybody gets a fair shot. But nobody knew how to implement it. And because they didn't know how to implement affirmative action, because you can't legislate behavior, and because they didn't know how to implement it, they set up quotas. This is where discrimination came in. You set up quotas. Well, the reverse discrimination. Well, you know, I can't get in because you have to hire blacks, and they're not as good as me. Well, no, that's not. But that's what was going on when affirmative action started, and I was in corporate America. And these are the things that I saw. It was affirmative action was implemented poorly. Affirmative action was misunderstood. And personally, I do not think you can legislate behavior. People have got to want to treat other people kindly. People have got to want to treat other people with love. If they don't want to do that, it's not going to happen. It just isn't. And there's going to be ugliness. And my only safe place is in the body. I have got to believe that my brothers and sisters in Christ love me as much as I love them. That is all I can hang my hat on. And I'm going to shut up now and give somebody else a chance.
Okay. All right.
I thought I saw Lisa's hand up. I'm not sure. Lisa, was your hand up? Maybe not.
She did. Someone did have a comment and said someone else in the class should have stood up for you and shut him down. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move into another section. And the issue is Black church, white church. Black church, white
Brother
church.
William? Brother William?
Yes.
Can y'all hear me okay? Can you hear me
Yes.
okay? I'm on my headphones. I'm driving.
We can.
But I just want to comment briefly on something Sister Bland said about quotas. Yeah, there were a lot of businesses and colleges and universities that tried to implement quotas regarding affirmative action and like trying to have a certain level of different groups represented, but that is unconstitutional. So they should not be trying to implement quotas. There is a push for increasing diversity, but it's unconstitutional to try to implement quotas. I just want to make that comment regarding affirmative action.
Okay. Now we're going to try to move on to another section. And the thing that always been a black church, white church. Black church, white church, black congregation, white congregation. Well, let me just say right up front, no such thing in the sight of God. No such thing in the sight of God. So the question, by the way, I don't want to be the only one talking. So the question is, where did it come from? And I did a couple of studies. One, it started maybe 100 plus years ago when there was segregation. White people could, black people could not use water fountains. If the whites use it, can go to parks if whites. So it just started, back then. And maybe that's where the theory came. Also, the other theory is the neighborhood. If a church is put in a certain neighborhood, in another neighborhood, maybe that's another theory man came up with, But scriptures is no such thing, no such thing. There's only one church that the Lord built, and that's all it is. And there's only one church that the Lord's going to come back for. Wendy, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, Wendy's going to share some experience. And before I get to Wendy, there's a difference in culture and racism. They're two different things. Culture is one thing, racism is another thing. Wendy is a member of our congregation. She's been going, how long you been there, Wendy? You and your mother?
Oh, probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, something like that, probably.
Oh my goodness. No wonder I got gray hair. But anyway, Wendy's going to share her experience in worshiping with us. And as you know, we are a predominantly black congregation. Wendy?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of be speaking for my mom, Carol, and myself. my mom and I both, she grew up going to Center Street, and so did I, and always felt Center Street was a little stuffy, little, didn't feel, I mean, grew up there, knew, that's where we didn't know any different really. And then my mom actually started going to Combs Street first and invited me to come. And honestly, we have never, both of us agree, we have never felt the love in a church like we do at Combs Street. I mean, from day one. And mom also visited other churches too. I know she went to North Street for a while, to Mount Comfort. And so we both agree that the love is just oozes from the people at Combs Street. And we have never gone anywhere else since going. And it just feels so much more welcoming and accepting, and it's really hard to describe until unless you've been in that situation. So anything else, Brother Williams, or does that kind of
Oh,
touch
that's
on it?
fine.
Okay.
You did good.
Okay.
Anybody else has a comment? Did I hear somebody?
This is Wendy again. Another thing I just wanted to say, it seems a good way to describe it, it seems more real. I feel like it's more real in the everything that the Brother Williams and the leaders just seem more real and actually care about you as an individual. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that? Because it's not a big discussion on black church, white church. There ain't no such thing. Okay. It may be because in the neighborhood, it may go back to where racism was. It was blacks and white were separate. But today that's not true.
So let me ask this to the group, since we're on this right now. Is there other incorrect ways that we divide the church up like we're not supposed to?
I'm sorry. You finished your question.
I was going to say, since we're on this topic of trying to identify these problems, can we identify other things while we're talking that are a problem that are very similar to these types of divisions or ways we identify different groups?
Okay. I'll let Norman go, then I'll respond.
Well, referring back to your question first, Brother Williams, you kind of talked to me yesterday and seeing if I would talk a little bit about me going to different, mostly all white or mostly all black congregations.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Go ahead.
It's okay. I don't have much to say. I completely agree with Wendy on some of the things about feeling, the love at Combs Street. And I truly believe that it has nothing to do with, and I'm not saying that she said this, but I truly believe that Combs Street isn't about race specifically, or strongly we could say that due to, I don't know if we ever had anyone really feel unwelcomed at Combs Street since I've been there that had to do anything racially. Now that being said, I've been to many congregations where I was definitely the minority, and I won't name those congregations because they're local. But I don't want to say that I felt so much different as opposed to what you were saying as far as culture, because culture is going to follow culture. And I believe what you were also saying as far as the neighborhood and the church being put in that neighborhood, it would just be like you couldn't expect, let's say you couldn't expect possibly a ton of different Asian churches, if you will, if you went to Africa. It's just not going to happen. Well, it's the same thing with neighborhoods, and I think real strongly people will feel more comfortable being around the same culture. So I think a lot of that has to do with it, but not so much saying Combe Street would say, well, we're an all black congregation, you know, we only want black. I don't feel like it's like that at all. I think people just associate with their own culture, so it makes it easier for them to go to that congregation. Now, that being said, have I felt different going to these different congregations? Yes, but I don't feel like it had anything to do with as far as anyone being racist. Now, I have been in a ton of different congregations with my dad being a preacher where there are racist people, but then again, that's anywhere you go, right? Now, I will say the last congregation that I attended before Combe Street, there was only one other black family. Now, did they feel left out? Absolutely not. They were a part of the worship. They taught class. I don't think they felt different, you know, them being a black family and having, being one of the only families there with me. And at the time, me being in a biracial marriage, I don't think anyone looked at it that way at all, you know. And I definitely don't feel like my race has anything with me going to Combe Street. When I went to Combe Street, I felt very welcomed. I felt very loved. And now these other congregations that may have been more Caucasian than anything, maybe not as much, but I feel like that doesn't have anything to do with race as much as people recognizing who their brothers and sisters are. And ultimately, that's all it comes down to, what it is. Now, a lot of these churches that have been around for a long time that have mostly black or mostly white could very be related back to when that church was started, as far as different water fountains and different churches and different schools. And when you go back and you actually look at the history, that's really where it did start. And it's because that's what they felt like it had to be at the time. Not saying that I agree with that at all, but I feel like a lot of that is where it comes. You know, when we come to the modern day where we don't have the history where we did back then, and, you know, everyone should be treated equal. I think all it is now is our brotherhood coming together as far as Christians, letting people that don't recognize the things that they don't know to look out for just because they're unaware and uneducated. I feel like any brethren shouldn't hold that against any other brother if that's how they were taught growing up, just because they're uneducated about it. I think as a Christian and a brother in those situations, we should go to them and say, hey, I felt this way because I am a minority or because of my race. Not that you were putting off that message, and I understand where you're coming from, but someone else that may not be a Christian or understand those things will feel that way when you say it. So I think as a Christian, if we do those things, being a part of the Lord's church, regardless of what congregation we go to, we can help cut some of this stuff out. But overall, that's how I feel about going to these different churches. It's really just cultural based, but I haven't really felt racism as much as some others probably have. But that being said, also, I haven't been as educated as I have been, finding out later on in my adult life that I am half African American, and a part of that, not having some of these things explained to me until I'm in my mid-20s, I only knew what I was growing up on. And if I was only surrounded by people that weren't as educated, I'm not going to have that education. So that's where I feel, Brother Williams, as far as different congregations, and mostly black or mostly white or mostly any other color or race.
Okay. Do anybody else have any comments they would like to make on that?
Yeah,
from
I,
Jeff?
I,
Brother, oh,
go ahead.
Okay,
oh,
let me get Sister Huff. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, I think we have to respect and accept maybe our cultural differences, the way we worship, and celebrate that. You know, I can think of times when we had the lectureship, and, you know, just the singing, maybe, you know, I think just appreciate the different cultures and how we come, because we can all worship together and respect each other's differences and still be brothers and sisters. Am I making sense what I'm trying to say? I don't expect everybody to change what the way they are. We have to accept the way we are. Okay.
Okay. Anybody
agree
from
with that.
Johnson? Anybody from Johnson? I want to make it fair.
I just listening on this whole conversation on culture, and I wonder, do we have to both struggle maybe with the understanding of the culture of Christ is taking preeminence in each of our lives and congregations over our own culture, and how does that play into what we struggle with? Because we've got stereotypes in both races and what the white culture is or black culture is, and how does Christ, who he says we should be and act like, and how does that affect the culture that we need to have in the church as far as unifying us? Is that makes sense?
Yes. Anybody want to answer that? I don't want to be the
Yeah.
only one talking. And let's get somebody new if we can. Well,
Could you ask that question one more time, Brother Jeremy?
I just think, we all kind of struggle with individual cultures, but as Christians, do we wrestle with this idea of that's not really our identity anyway? Or do we have more allegiance to our own culture over, our allegiance to Christ? And what does that do to change our culture that we should have collectively?
That is
okay, JP.
Yeah, and I was going to add, so the next question that's coming up is and it ties in perfectly, so I'm going to go ahead and say it now because it all works together. And the problems with being comfortable and uncomfortable. So
Yes.
that goes with the same deal, and I just wanted to add that on to Jeremy's thoughts that this is a problem everywhere. And we've hit on this a couple times before, and I've had some people bring it up, but I just wanted to throw that in there to go along with it. Being comfortable or uncomfortable shouldn't be a determining factor in anything as long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And so I'll be quiet now.
No, you
So
good.
I have something, Brother Williams.
Yes, Steve.
So coming to that, in all of this discussion that we're talking about, about where this come from, there's a lot that could be said. I think culture and history and community, but even when you think about the fact that the locations of the congregations, even in the New Testament, had a lot to do with families. So sometimes you have congregations that are made up of families. So if you had families that were black or whatever, that was kind of the nucleus of the congregation. But I think that when we're getting to this about culture, I think that's an important thing, because then you really are talking about identity. And my identity as a black man, or my identity as a white man or whatever. And I think that Paul really addresses that, in Ephesians. It's like what you're saying is does our culture with Christ take precedent over the culture that we live in this world? So I think Paul is trying to emphasize that there needs to be more teaching, because sometimes even in the church, we don't really understand our identity. Going back to what Sister Beverly said, when that teacher responded to her in the way that he did, he didn't really think about the identity, because he saw the difference in him and her. And Paul was writing really to let the church know the Gentiles being brought in, there's a whole different identity in Christ, different from the Jews, different from just the Gentiles. It's the identity that we have as the church in Christ. And so that we're looking at like, okay, this is what I am in Christ. And this is what I'm striving to be in Christ and where God has put me, So what I'm saying, I believe that there needs to be more teaching. I think that's why I think Ephesians is so important, because what really is our identity in the world? We're in the world, but we're not of the world. I'll stop right there.
Okay, let me get Jill, and then we're going to carry this conversation over the next meeting, and especially what JP just talked about. We have to talk about culture and why we feel uncomfortable about it. Okay, let me get Jill, and let me get somebody from Johnson Street too. Go ahead, Jill.
So it's a lot to unpack, and I feel like that's a long conversation, which is why I'm glad that we're having these conversations. But with that idea of who we are culturally in the world and who we are supposed to be as Christians, I mean, that's something that has gotten confused and intermingled, especially with the organization of congregations as we see it today. What happened is literally the world and the way of the world infiltrated the church in the way that we're supposed to be, which is why we see the separation that exists still today. That's really started, the reason why churches ended up being segregated as they are today is really a lot to do with Reconstruction era and Jim Crow and how that infiltrated into the church. And that was the seeds that kind of started the things that had churches to be so separate. And that's something that if we don't have the time to talk of with the topics that are coming up in the later weeks, that's something I most definitely wouldn't mind having just a conversation just about that and its origins. But I feel like what happens is it's very easy to get caught up in what the world tells us we are, what the world tells us and how we should act. And it's easy to hold on to that instead of holding on to the ways that Christ gives us. And like you were saying, Brother Steve, with what Paul is teaching in Ephesians, we really have to keep in mind that we don't actually have those separations. The world has all these separations, which in all honesty is an illusion with the way Christ has it set up and the love that Christ gives us to have. And that's honestly something that is a challenge to get rid of, though. And especially what you were mentioning, JP, with the uncomfortableness when you start out letting the ways of the world seep in and letting that organize the way that we conduct ourselves. It becomes difficult to, I guess, pinpoint where that uncomfortableness comes from. And it also becomes difficult to work against that uncomfortableness because it's a process of kind of taking out the world and making sure that the word of Christ is what is being maintained and promoted in our actions, and that's something that with that uncomfortableness we may feel at the front end, but it's something that we can also work through. And you said you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I was listening to a lectureship, and the preacher said every person you meet is a temple that God's spirit hopes to dwell in. And so when we meet other people, sometimes we are focused on the flesh and not the fact that by and through everything God was made. Sorry, the baby hit mute. So if we can keep in mind those spiritual things, it will help us combat the uncomfortability that we may experience, just like a child looking at a food they don't want to eat because they've never tasted it before. And they don't know what the experience is going to be. But once they taste it, oh, okay, this is good. I really was caught off guard by the texture. So we can't get caught off guard by our flesh, our preconceived notions. It's just like Sister Bland said earlier, you're looking at differences and those differences are intertwined with negativity. But when you are endeavoring to keep the spirit of unity and the bond of peace, you're not looking for differences. You're looking to create unity, no matter how uncomfortable it is. So it's just a mindset you have to have, like renewing your mind constantly. I mean, it's just a constant thing.
Okay. Yeah, we still would like to hear from somebody from Johnson.
I'll talk just a little bit. I can't remember. It was at the first meeting that we had a brother from Combs Street that was talking about comfort and talking about spiritual maturity. And I can't remember who said this, but he said it was Steve.
Yes.
So he was talking about as we become more mature, we're able to get past that discomfort. Because if we're focusing on Christ, if we're focusing on the Bible, the Word of God, there's going to be unity. And I think that maturity is a big part of it, and I think familiarity is a big part of it too. And I think until we continue to meet like this or start doing stuff together and just get to know each other, I mean, that discomfort's not really going to go away.
That's right.
We have to be deliberate with it. We have to really make an effort to do this and to spend time. And I can't remember who else said this, but one of y'all said at one point that, you know, if we can't expect to be together in heaven for eternity, if we don't get together well here, like that's probably not going to happen. So we got to do it.
Okay. Anybody else from Johnson?
I would say too, I appreciate, you know, the comments on this question, because it's transforming our mind is what we've been asked to do. And that's a daily process of saying, look, the world wants you to think this way and look at yourself this way, or look at other people this way, or different from you. And we fight all those things, say, no, God says, this is how I want you to think. And it's a biblical worldview instead of this shove from the world of this is the view. And so transforming our mind, if we don't do that, we don't see each other like God's asking us to. And so we do hide and fight all these things that break that unity and division up. So that's so different than what the world even, I mean, there's no offer from the world like that. That's the unique thing of the church.
Okay. Anybody else before we close?
Brother Williams, can I say something real quick?
Yes, sir.
I strongly believe this, and this isn't for everyone, but certain people or certain Christians even, or even really anyone that comes to the door, even if they're a visitor, the question's asked, how do we take away the discomfort? So I like that you guys are saying we got to get to know each other, our brethren. If we can't get together here, how can we get together in heaven? Well, we won't get together in heaven because one of us is at fault, right? If not both. But what I'm wanting to get at and what I was trying to point at is, as far as making someone comfortable, sometimes we have to really think about what we say before we say it. And what I mean by that is I think people can say things without knowing that they are making someone feel uncomfortable, or may even be looked at as something that they may have said something that was racist and didn't really understand why or how it was racist. And now that has come up in the church a few times. So we just really have to be careful. And I'll give you an example of it being innocent and no one meaning anything by it. And I talked to you and Sister Williams, I believe, or someone, maybe it was Brother Steve. But here's an example. Someone comes up to me and they say, oh, hey, brother, you know, what's your name? Glad to have you here. You know, who are you? Such and such. Hey, you know, my name's Norman. You know, tell them a little bit. I'm just coming through visiting you guys. You know, I go to Combe Street, and that's fine and everything. Well, later on, we get to know each other, and, you know, that brother felt maybe comfortable talking to me and try to get to know me more. And it may come out accidentally. Oh, so yeah, and this happens a lot, Brother Williams, and everyone, just to kind of open their eyes about trying to see this from that racial point of view. Oh, your skin is so pretty. It's dark. You tan easy. If you don't mind, what are you? Now that could make someone feel uncomfortable just for the fact to say, you know, the way that it was phrased, what are you? You know, I'm not, but someone else possibly could. And that's just one small thing. But I think as far as what we're trying to do here is to, you know, get past all these things. But I think that's something that we may just need to, like, kind of keep in the back of our mind. How am I going to come out and be perceived as a Christian, even if I was innocently not trying to make it that way?
Okay. Let me just say something, because I talked to JP last week about this. We're talking about racism in the Church of Christ, okay? We want to make sure we don't have any racism, for instance, in Northwest Arkansas, plus any Church of Christ. And then they came in, and I really appreciate that, because they want to make sure that they're not racist people. Now, in our next meeting, which will be 3 weeks from tonight, not 2 weeks, be 3 weeks from tonight, we're going to talk about traditions, being comfortable, and also the third one, I forgot that. Oh, JP asked a question, very important, and we skipped over. Are there other things that's a difference in the churches? Other things that separate us in the church. And so the next meeting, we'll discuss those three things. Okay, JP, did you have anything?
No, that's wonderful. Perfect.
Okay. I appreciate all y'all for attending tonight. Remember, our next meeting is, what date is it, JP? I forgot.
October the 5th.
October the 5th, okay.
At 6:30.
October the 5th at 6:30. And I'd like to say, everybody, think of the subjects we're going to talk about so that everybody can contribute to it. I just don't want to sound like it's all coming from Combe Street, because we're trying to unify all of us together, okay? Okay.
Brother Williams, I'll adjust
Yes.
the calendar and it should reflect automatically on everybody who's been invited. So I'll change the date for the next one.
Okay. Okay. Are there anything else? Yes, sir. Brother Mitchell?
Yes.
Oh, I saw your light on. Did you have something?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Arvin.
Okay, then. All right, then. Thank y'all so much. Had a very good meeting tonight. And then I always say, the things we discuss, pray on. God give us a better light once we pray on things. God give us a better insight also. Okay? So with that, we're going to ask JP if he'll close us out tonight with prayer.
Before JP does this, I meant to mention this last time,
Yes.
that we take the time, we got a few weeks in between our meeting, that we find each other on Facebook. I think that's a great way to get to know each other in between this and become friends that way. And you get to see, each other's families and what you're posting and sharing, and you guys get to see each other that way. So I'm trying to do that. If you find me before I find you, send me a friend request on there.
Yeah. And I thank you, Jeremy, because I think you reached out to us. And then I think you put a picture of everybody. Was that you? Okay. Put a picture of everybody that was attending the meeting. And I thought that was very nice. If anybody's going to let their light shine, it should be us. And when people see this, see the unity, lately, the last 2 months, I've been talking about unity, strong friendship, and talking about prayer and talking about loving each other. But when people see this, it just may draw others also. Okay, let me hush because I'm talking too much.
No, you're not.
Okay. JP, if you dismiss us then.